I just feel that though my age used to feel like a limiting factor when I first got into coaching, and the more that I've grown and the more that I've worked with people, the more that I've realized it's more of a superpower because I'm able to resonate with someone that's 20, and I can also resonate with someone that's 45 because I have an old soul that I've been told for so long.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Carl J. Cox here. I'm the host of the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. This episode is brought to you by 40 Strategy. 40 Strategy is built to make strategy work for small to medium-sized businesses and organizations by helping them design great strategic plans, but more importantly, actually help them get it done. To learn more, go to 40strategy.com. We're very excited. Our book, Lost at CEO, is out there, and it is making a huge difference for entrepreneurs who are reading the book. So if you want to actually get a copy of that, you can go to amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, audible.com. But if you actually want a signed copy of the book, just send me an email to Carl J. Cox, CarlJCox, at 40strategy.com. And if you're listening to this podcast and you let me know that, I will send you a free signed copy of the book. So please go ahead and do that. We look forward to getting that. All right, we like to do a shout out from time to time, and that shout out is going to go to Nick Hutchinson, who is the Book Thinkers CEO. He had an incredible event that he does in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm looking forward to going to the next show here. And James actually is how we met at that particular event. James Brackin IV is a personal coach who helps entrepreneurs get unstuck by finding the route of their procrastination, which is a challenge. He's also host of the Top 1% podcast, the You Can Too podcast. What this podcast does, it really has conversation with creators, entrepreneurs, thought leaders to make you happier, healthier, wealthier, and wiser. What I really impress about James is this is not your ordinary person. He's a young guy. Matter of fact, when we first started talking, he was like, I want to be in your podcast. And he's like, because James, how old are you right now again?
20.
Okay. I'm like, I'm not gonna put a 20-year-old on the guest. And then he has like better guests than I do, and he's more higher rated. I was like, all right, James, let's not mess around. Let me learn from you. And so, hey, James, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to chat. We chatted a little bit before this. Grateful that we got to meet in Columbus, and just excited for a great conversation I know we're about to have.
Absolutely. Okay. So why don't you start out with the fun part of the story. How in the heck did you start becoming an entrepreneur at 17 years old?
Well, I'll say this. When I was in high school, I tore my labrum and I played baseball throughout most of my life. I tore my labrum and COVID happened at the same time. So I was sleeping in a recliner for 2 weeks, not really able to move much. Took oxys every few hours, just not knowing what I was going to do with my life. Thought I was going to be a real estate agent because college really never made sense for me. Found that looked like a route that made sense because there was ability to scale. That's what I always thought is, why would I do a job that no matter what I do, I only can make this amount of money? And that always scared the living hell out of me. And so I thought real estate was going to be the path for me. And I invested into working with a real estate team in my state. I was the youngest person they'd ever seen. So I've always been the youngest person in really pretty much everything that I've done. They looked at me like I was crazy. And within working with them for a good amount of time, I realized that real estate really wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an investor, not an agent. I didn't want to work for someone else in that way. Long story short, I ended up starting to listening to podcasts and reading books. And I was I took a lot of pride in not reading any books throughout most of my life. And so as soon as I left high school and I actually started recognizing that I could read books that improved my life, well, I got addicted. And so I listened to a podcast one day, and at the end of the podcast, they were talking about a coaching program. Had no idea what that meant, but I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew I wanted to be able to really make my own hours and everything in between. And so hopped on a sales call, got sold like crazy. I jumped into a coaching program, and so much has happened since then, but that's really how I got into the space of coaching, I would say, and podcasting is a part of that.
So what has surprised you the most as you've gotten into this journey?
The people. The amount of people that I'm able to connect with blow me away every single day. It's the coolest thing. So much has blown me away. I'm inspired every single day by the people that I get to speak to and the work that I get to do, that most of us are usually struggling with the same problems. That's something that I've been surprised by, I guess.
Okay, so one of my favorite people who I haven't met that perhaps you can help me out with introduction, who's been on your show, and I know once again he's a busy person, but Seth Godin. I'm just kind of curious, that conversation that you had with him, what was that like? was that the best podcast you ever had? Give me that kind of curious, once again, when you talk to somebody who's so well known and from an author perspective in the books that he's produced.
Yeah, Seth Godin is a true gem, man. His presence is felt, that's for sure. Best podcast I ever had. I think there's a lot of everyone has their unique perspective and different things, and I'm excited to talk about. Seth was definitely something that was a little unexpected, but at the same time, such a great experience. I think something I really took from him was we talked a lot about imposter syndrome on that podcast, and I think a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome, and me and him have a very similar perspective on it, where I believe that imposter syndrome is usually a good thing, because if you're feeling like an imposter, that pretty much means that you're in a position that you're uncomfortable with, that maybe you don't have everything that you quote unquote need to go down that route, and that usually means stepping into a position that you're uncomfortable with, and that's going to help you grow. And the way that he worded it was, he was an imposter coming on my podcast, and that made me feel a little bit crazy, because obviously it's Seth Godin. I'm speaking with Seth Godin right now. I was 18 at the time, or 19, and it was insane speaking with him, of course, but it just reminded me that no matter where we are, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, 21 international best-selling author, he still feels like an imposter in different positions. And so that was something that definitely I took away from that experience, I would say.
And I appreciate you bring that up. I think it's I think it's one of the most misunderstood things of when people get success and from the outside opinion. There's this outside opinion that everything's perfect. They're having no problems. It's easy. And we're all human. We all have the exact same emotions and caring and worries and concerns. And just the difference is those who have been able to quote unquote have success have been able to get through those obstacles, right? But we still feel this often, right? This, hey, how did I get here, right? How did I get this opportunity to be in this position that people would love to be there, go into this different area. So as in your current, once again, business that you're doing today, as you're growing it, what has been some of your biggest challenges as you're growing in yourself, right? Your own entrepreneurial journey. What are you trying to do now to help overcome your biggest challenge?
I'll answer the first question is what my biggest challenge is. And I think my biggest challenge is narrowing down who I'm helping. And I say that because when I first started coaching, I'll say this, everyone that I have worked with has been in a different position and a different age, dealing with a different journey that they're going on. And so trying to target down, this is the person that I help, has been definitely tough, because I can help so many different people. And that's not to say that I just feel that, though, my age used to feel like a limiting factor when I first got into coaching. And the more that I've grown, and the more that I've worked with people, the more that I've realized it's more of a superpower, because I'm able to resonate with someone that's 20, and I can also resonate with someone that's 45, because I have an old soul that I've been told for so long. And so I think narrowing down who specifically I can help so that I can really help them to the maximum would be the struggle. And then what I'm doing to overcome that is continuously learning, hiring coaches myself, and figuring out how I can better myself. Like, I find as soon as I became a coach, I realized the power of coaching by hiring a coach in itself. And ever since then, I've continued to hire coaching in so many different areas of my life. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, some of the greatest leaders, especially those who are in coaching, have said you should be investing 10% of your revenues back into yourself, right? Meaning, finding ways to re-educate yourself, do the right things. And I found that myself. And what's crazy is the more and more you go towards things, when you start out, you're like, oh, I would never spend whatever the amount is, $500, $1,000, $2,000, $100,000, right? $1 million. I know, some people out there are spending that much, right, on their own self-education or more. But once again, it's about continuing to not be satisfied by where you're at, and to help you to continue, as you said beforehand, to stay uncomfortable about what you're going to going forward. So you have an interesting story going back to that you talk about in your bio that I didn't share with, that really put perspective in your life. You want to share that story? I think it's pretty compelling, and I'm curious how it has formed you today.
Yeah. So getting into coaching, a big reason why was I lost a lot of family growing up. So my father and uncle both passed away at 37. And so when people tell me that I'm so young, right, I'm 20 years old, I definitely know I'm young. But in perspective, it doesn't always feel that way sometimes. And so lost my father, lost my uncle both at 37, but I was younger when they passed away. What really hit me was when my grandfather passed away. He passed away a few months before his retirement. This was someone that worked his entire life and didn't even get to experience everything that, you think you want to get to once you're done working. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks. It made me realize, like, I want to have an impact on the world. I definitely do not want to go down a route where I just work my life away and don't really get to experience life for what it is and actually help people, because I believe that we all have a gift. And if we're not putting our work into the world, then we're doing a disservice, because every single one of us is different in some respect. And so that was a big impact on me getting into what I'm doing, and made me realize that I wanted to live with intention instead of just going through life, coasting through life, is what I feel so many people do. Like, so many people my age right now are in college coasting, is what I like to say, is they're going to college because they don't know what they want to do, and they don't want to put in the effort or take the responsibility to figure out what they want to do. And so I took the opposite route of investing into myself, like you said, and I've continued to do so, and figure out that maybe, as we spoke a little bit before this, maybe I don't have the best vision in the world, but what I do focus on is the direction. Am I moving in the direction of where I'd like to go? And that's what matters most.
And once again, sincerity of going through his loss, especially at a young age, like you've been, you have had. I've also experienced a lot of loss around me and a lot of family members, especially in recent years. And one of the most interesting things is at a funeral, nobody talks about what they did at work. What they talk about is the impact they had on the people, perhaps all around them. Perhaps there were some people at work, but it's about their impact, right? That's what really matters. And when you talked about your grandfather's story, that really hit me as well, because my father had Alzheimer's relatively young in his life, relatively speaking. And you can have this vision of, I'm going to quote unquote retire. I'm going to work and just work so hard. A person I know, an investor, one of his good friends, counted every day down to his eventual, retirement day. He golfed with him regularly, and so he would always talk about, oh, I've got 1 year left, or 6 months left, and 3 months left, and then finally got to the day, and he finally got there, and he was walking. I think this is in Tampa Bay. He was walking in Tampa Bay, and a car went off the road, hit him while he was walking on the sidewalk, and his life ended. And what's so sad, once again, is right when we have this vision of what could be later. Well, there might not be a later, and the importance of living in the now, right? And try not to live to this quote unquote retirement life, because there's no certainty over what will happen to our health, or if an outside event may take place. So I think that story of what happened to your grandfather is, I think that's such an important part, to live today, right? Regardless of what you're trying to accomplish in your career, live now, right? This is what's important. Don't just grind all day, and recognize, what are you grinding to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important. And I'm so grateful for it, because as I feel so many people, they live through the mindset of, I'm a victim. I mean, I think that so many of us, we just know that that's the role that we take, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And when COVID happened and I started reading books and listening to podcasts and recognizing that I could improve myself and I can take a different perspective on my life, that I could take the meaning from that I placed on an experience and change the meaning to it, was everything to me. So to give you a little context, and I say this on almost every podcast that I go on, there was a moment in my life when I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And I asked, how is this happening for me? And my life changed, and my life genuinely changed from that moment, because when you ask a different question, one, you not only get a different answer, but you change the way that you look at life and every experience that happens to you. And so seeing that, I'm able to help other people live with more intention, so that they can recognize that, one, they need to stop playing small, and they need to get out of their own way so that they can do the things that they want to do now. Because like you just said, that as much as we feel like tomorrow's promise, it really isn't. And I feel like so many of us live like our life is not finite, and it is. And I think that that's so important. I keep that on my brain at all times.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I think it is a challenging thing of, you have clients, right? And you have to start making choices of who you can serve, and finding different ways to do it. First of all, it's actually one of the most important things we can do. It's Pareto principle is like, you have to go towards you could create the most value. But there's this, I don't mind saying it, there's this time we feel bad, right? I was like, oh, because I was there, or, you could go back to, this is where I was at a different period of time. But you recognize that, once again, wherever it is in the value stream, it might be somewhere different, and you have to help out towards that. How did you discern what you should do, right? Like, so what did you do for your own parameter to discern, this is who I should be working with versus those who perhaps I shouldn't be working with?
When I first started, I wasn't thinking of who I should help. It was just more so I need to get my message out. Because I think something that stops a lot of people is obviously the imposter syndrome that comes up. We can think of the fear of what other people are going to think of us. And that was what held me back. When I invested into a coaching program, I had the idea of starting a podcast. I didn't know what a coach was. I knew I wanted to help people. And I knew that that was going to be the route once I invested into it. But as soon as I invested into a coaching program, and this was more money than I made in multiple months at my current job. So it was like, I did it into a payment plan. So I didn't even have all the money when I went to invest into it. And that forced me to put my back against the wall. And at that same time, it was irreversible. I had to make it happen. And so that was the only thing that was on my mind is I have to make this happen. And so the only thing that mattered to me was I need to post every single day. It doesn't matter what happens. I need to post every single day because that means no matter what happens, I'm going to get out to one person, at least one person. We can just assume that. And my first video got 25,000 views and I was blown away. I was like, what is going on right now? After that, they didn't go that crazy. The few after. So of course the dopamine hit went down, but it was recognizing and it was just affirming to me that I was doing what I needed to do. And so whether that meant reaching out to people or whatever that came down to, it was just, I need to get in more conversations. I need to be speaking with more people because like I just said, I really believe I can resonate with most people. I think that's a gift that I have is I'm able to connect with a lot of people. And I think that was just the intention. It wasn't who do I need to help, but it was just more so I need to help people. That's really what was on my mind.
No, I love it. So now in your business that you have today, how are you measuring success?
My standards. I've said this for a while. A lot of people measure their success as the external results, and I measure my success as the actions that I take. So if I'm doing what I said I was going to do, I am succeeding, regardless of the results say that or not, because I know that they will over time. It's what I said earlier is I focus on direction instead of results, because if we only focus on results, we're going to be really disempowered because there's a lot of days that we're not going to get the results that we're looking for, right? And so it's my standards. If I'm doing what I said I was going to do and I'm withholding the mindset that I say I want to put out into the world, and I'm reinforcing what I'm telling other people to do, because I know for a lot of people, a lot of coaches that I know, especially say they're coaches, but they don't have coaches themselves. And so how are you going to be able to do that? Right. And so if I'm being in integrity with myself and I'm showing up for what I said I was going to do, that's success for me, man.
What you're describing, I really appreciate it. It's the difference between leading and lagging indicators, right?
Yeah.
So the lagging indicators, the outcomes, right? This is what we're trying to get towards, meaning it might be revenue, it might be gross margin, it might be net income. That's the end result. It is the end result by definition. It's what the accountants tell you at the end of the day. This is what you've done. But how you get there is your actions.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing you can control. You can't control whether somebody's going to sign that contract later, but you can control whether you actually try to connect with somebody, or as you said, did a post to do something, or in a podcast to go out to do something. Those are the control. And interestingly enough, Amazon, which of course everyone's heard of Amazon, that's what they focus on too. It's one of their key things and their strategic principles is they're like, how do we do the things that we know and get to their outcome? Another thing I like what they do is when they're strategic planning is they'll put a chair, so they read this memo, of what's happening, and they'll put an empty chair, and the empty chair is representing the customer who's not in the room. What are they doing to serve that customer? Because so many times we're making decisions, we're not thinking about them, we're thinking about me, us, right? And nobody cares about me or us at the end of the day. All people cares about is their end result. They want to get to their outcome, they get to get their action. So I think it's awesome that you have figured out that on the way how you measure success is focusing on those leading actions, because that's exactly what we coach people regularly and consistently. But just to let you know, some of the smartest minds in the world are not doing that. They focus on the end results. Because why? Because their quarterly outcomes, or quarterly objectives, or quarterly releases, or annual goals, they're trying to hit an EBITDA number, or a net income number, or sales number for the commissions. You got to do the little stuff. You got to do the actions you can control, and then you get to the better outcomes. So I think that's a fantastic insight. So James, I'm really curious now, asking this based on what you just said. What type of daily habits do you do on a consistent basis to help make sure that you can bring your all regardless of the outcomes that's happening?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind that I've really solidified over this past year, especially, well, one is meditation. That's just an absolute, it has to be there. I actually did a Wim Hof. So I match meditation and like a breathing technique, and I'll do one or I'll do the other. I usually try to do Wim Hof before I hop on any podcast to really be present in what I'm doing. I did one right before this, and it makes me really be where my feet are, is what I like to say. But the thing that I've really solidified is I used to be a chronic snooze button hitter. I guess you could say. I would always hit the snooze button, man. Like getting up in the morning, the last thing I felt like doing at 5:30 was getting up and going to the gym or doing whatever I had to do. And so for me, the number one thing is not hitting the snooze and immediately getting out of bed and going to the gym. Because I know for me, and I don't know about anyone else, but I can get straight to work, but I definitely am not fully there unless I move my body first. And so getting to the gym, that's that first thing that just sets me up for my day. And once I'm done and I get home from there, I'm locked in, I'm ready to go. That has to be the number one thing for me. And then meditation, stillness is so big, especially as if anyone listening to this that's an entrepreneur, I assume most, it's really hard to get your brain to say, okay, let's slow down, let's stop, because there's always something that you can do. There's always something that has to be checked off. And so meditation is being with myself and allowing myself to actually be where I'm at instead of constantly trying to move on to that next thing, because it is so easy to do that. And that's definitely something that I've had to make a priority ever since I've gotten to entrepreneurship first and foremost.
I love it. Good for you. I think that is one of it's been talked about a lot, but not many people do it, and so to be able to stop and pause and to breathe, right? Like literally take a few deep breaths and okay, where am I at? How am I doing? Right. And to be focused again, because it's so easy to get caught up in that last email or that last conversation or last little challenge. Like, how do I refocus and get to be in the now again, especially like when we're doing something like our podcast, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, hey, I got to forget about all the other challenges, all the worries, all the challenges. Like we're recording right now. And if we don't deliver now and provide a great message, story, experience, people won't listen. But if we crush it, right, and have a great conversation, that's what people get excited about it. So now I want to talk about a little bit more of this. You've talked about it multiple times, as direction versus, let's talk about your mission a bit. How do you make sure that you're constantly moving towards your mission? So maybe describe that a little bit deeper, for our audience.
Yeah. I think for me, this has always been, I go back to my standards, because I really find that for a lot of people, the difficult part is consistency. It's just showing up at the end of the day. We know what we need to do, but how many people are actually doing what they need to do, right? And so for me, like when I started my podcast, I'll use that as a great example. I solidified that I am going to release an episode every Tuesday and every Thursday. It's just going to happen. There is no way around it. It's going to happen. That is a way that I'm making sure that I'm moving towards where I say I want to go. Because if you don't see an episode on Thursday, well, then I'm not showing up for myself. And that means I need to be reaching out to a bunch of guests every single day. That means I need to be doing the post-production after the podcast. That means I need to be doing the research to make sure that I make the most out of the podcast. Like there's so much that goes into it. And the same thing for client calls, for whatever it is making sure that I'm doing what I need to do on a weekly basis is the way that I like to look at it, from daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, however you look at it. What is the metric that you are setting for yourself that makes sure you are moving in the direction that you want to go in? And so I just like to use the podcast as an example, because most people don't even get past 10 episodes. I think I'm on a 210 or 208 or something around there. And no matter what happens, there's going to be an episode every single Tuesday and every single Thursday. And there will be a time in the future where that goes to 3 episodes a week. And so it's just making sure that I'm showing up. And I think especially on social media, it's a great way for accountability, because you're putting yourself up in front of a bunch of people. Are you going to do what you said you were going to do, or are you not going to show up? And so it's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, good for you. And the consistency. I agree with you. It is fascinating how many times I restart something. Oh, we got a great idea. And it's, well, what's your goal? And I want to start a podcast. I mean, there's a lot of podcasts out there, folks. You know that, right? And thank you, by the way, for listening to this podcast right now. And I appreciate you take the time, because there's a lot of options. But once again, how are you going to help make sure that you're going to be consistent? And we only do one a week, but we're consistent with it. Every Tuesday morning, our podcast gets out there, and we want to make sure that we deliver a great episode for our guests, and they can expect that, right? They know that release is going to be out, and they know we're going to send out our Saturday strategy for Saturday blog. They know they're going to get that, right? That's the type of things you do, because you break that promise, so to speak. You don't show up, people stop listening, they'll stop reading, they'll stop paying attention, right? And you want to, just like everything else we want to create the right habits. And love it how you're creating those habits on a consistent basis. So let's talk about a little bit of the long term for you. Here you are, young man who's done a lot more than a lot of people at your age has done. Let's go 10 years from now. Where do you see yourself then? What type of impact do you think you're gonna have the world of? Here you started so early, frankly, compared to a lot of other people have. How can you envision yourself 10 years from now, and what type of difference you think you make in other people's lives at that point?
So it's a difficult question to narrow down the impact that I'll have, but I hope it's, of course, a positive one. When I think of where I'd like to be in 10 years from now, I think of the direction that I'm at now, in the sense that I love most days. Like I truly love what I do almost every single day. I feel like I've succeeded, and as you said, I'm just getting started. Like I feel like I've already succeeded. I feel for most people, success is getting to some end goal. And I think for me, it's getting on the process of just actually doing it. Like I would never think that for a podcast, I'll use that example again, is every single week I get to talk to really cool people. Why would I ever want that to end? Why would I ever? And I think of that in everything else, whether it's a coaching business or a podcast or maybe speaking in the future, whatever it is, I don't want it to end. And so I spoke with Bruce Lipton yesterday, I want to say, and this is someone that's 80 years old. He wrote so many books and has been in the space of consciousness and belief and so much for decades. And when I was speaking with him, he had so much energy, more than most people I've ever spoken to. And when I look at him, I bet you that he didn't have much of a vision of where he thought he would be, but it was more so that he just did what he loved most days, and he got to where he is, and he doesn't want it to end. And I spoke with Gay Hendricks, another author that wrote 40 plus books, that has been the space of consciousness for decades as well. And it was the same experience that I had. And I find that those people are the people that I look up to, that I think they are so alive with life on a day-to-day basis to such an extreme extent that I have not seen from many people, especially the people that I'm surrounded by. And so when I look of the impact that I want to have, I of course want to make sure it's a positive one. But what I think of the specific impact I want to have is I really want to help people unlearn belief systems that stop them from achieving more in their life. And for me, it was becoming aware that my beliefs were corrupting my ability to show up for myself, which corrupted my results in my life, which corrupted my ability to actually create a life that I loved. And so becoming aware of that changed the direction of my life. And if I can help people really get past themselves, that's the number one thing that I want to do.
All right, so we're going to hit the book question, because I'm always, especially for you and being involved with book thinkers, right? There's so
Yeah.
many books out there. What's a book that, or perhaps two, that has really inspired you, really made a huge difference?
Yeah, I'm glad you said two, because I can think of 30. The first one that comes to mind for me is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. This is a book that I don't think many people, at least a lot of people that I know, haven't read. Why I find it so impactful is that it will help people understand the deeper reasons for why their negative habits continue to reinforce in their life. Like a lot of the time we know that what we need to break out of, but we don't know the science behind why it's happening to begin with. And really understanding the deeper meaning behind the quantum physics, behind how things happen in life, was so impactful for me. It changed the way I see the world. The second one that I think about is A New Earth. So there's the science side, and then there's the spirituality side. And both of those, if you read just those two books, and I say this to pretty much everyone, if you read those two books, they would change your life. Truly. I believe that to my soul. So I think you need a little bit of science and you need a little bit of spirituality, and both of those bring it.
Great recommendations. I appreciate your insights and obvious thoughtfulness behind them. They really make an impact to you. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question before we go to, how can people connect with you? Which is, there's a lot of young people that potentially listen to this, or maybe the other thing is there's perhaps some parents out there, right? And they're like, man, I wish my kid could be like James. What did perhaps maybe it's your parents, or perhaps it's just you, for somebody who's, once again, in mind, where I have kids your age, right? What type of advice would you help give to parents to help foster, a young man, young woman, to have the confidence to be an entrepreneur at a young age like you are?
I would say, to preface, that it's not confidence, because when I jumped into this space, there was no confidence there. It wasn't present. So I would say that the confidence came from competence. It came from showing up and keeping the promises that I made to myself. And what allowed me to do that was the investment to myself. My life really changed when I bet on myself, because a lot of people are interested in it. They think they want to do something in this realm, but they're not committed to it. So what I would say is the power of proximity is a real thing. And it's a true thing that has changed the direction of my life, whether it's with book thinkers or my coaching business. I surrounded myself with 1,000 other coaches, was the youngest coach in over 1,000 coaches. I was surrounded by people that were doing it, that had just the same fears as me, and helped me feel like, oh, it's not my age that's holding me back. It's just the beliefs that every single one of us has. And so being surrounded by a lot of people helped me realize that. So I would say, find a way to put your child, or whoever it may be, in a position that is around the people that are in a position that they want to be in. It's with a podcast. Like I'm talking with people that are in a position that I want to be in, and I want to learn about a specific topic that they've spent a lot of time in their life overcoming, or trying to really come down to why it happens in life. And so in pretty much everything that I've done in my life, I've just always tried to find and be really, really curious about the ways that I can improve my life through learning through others that have already done it.
What you said there, I think is what I have found is it's helpful to find young adults don't always listen to their parents, right? It's pretty common they don't, right? And so one of the best ways is actually to bring, if they're willing to, right, to bring other experts, other people with wisdom, and they'll perhaps listen to them, right?
Mhm.
Is to bring other. That's what I loved about. He says, how do you find to get other experts, other people of wisdom, because that becomes inspiring. It's one thing seeing it through our parent, but it's another thing seeing through a friend. I had the privilege of helping out, just for a friend, and seeing Taylor, she ended up getting an opportunity to get an internship at one of the big four accounting firms, right? And I had one little small part in it, but part of the value behind it was I was that third party, that innocent third party, right? That was willing to spend and invest some time with somebody so they can help achieve their dreams. And that's what I would encourage once again is if you're listening out there, once again, there has to be comfort around it, but don't just talk with somebody one time, follow up with them, especially the young people of the world, and check to see if they're doing it right. Check to see if they're like following through and getting done. Because James, what you've done once again is remarkable, because not many people. I loved what you said. I didn't have the confidence, but I did things to create competency. I think that was a great quote that you had there. And then through that, you've been able to gain confidence, right, over time, because you've been putting in the work. I think that's an awesome analogy. So James, how can people connect and learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say first, thank you for having me again. You're such a great host, and I love what you're putting into the world. Where people can find me is anywhere, really, on any platform at James Brackin IV, and then the You Can Too podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. That's where I'll be.
Awesome, James. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Measure Success podcast.
Thank you.
And to everyone else who's listening, I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope you reach out and learn more about James and what he's doing. He's, once again, I think a great inspiration to not only the young people, but to us older ones, right? That if really you could do it at any age. And you talked about also some of the people who have had the most experience, right? And they still have the energy of somebody who's young. I love that. I love that passion you talked about. So as we like to say on this, if you enjoyed the show, we appreciate your ratings to go out, give us a rating. This enables us to get great guests like James and other people who have been on the show. And as we always like to say, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.